We can't learn about the Progressive Era without learning about Teddy Roosevelt as well. Theodore Roosevelt is going to be well known for many reasons. He's going to rise very steadily through the government ranks and kind of works his way up. With the Spanish-American War, he's going to kind of gain national fame when he's going to leave his post in government to go lead the Rough Riders to fight in war, becomes a wartime hero. Remember, the Rough Riders was that cavalry unit that was partially responsible for helping to get that victory in the Spanish-American War. He becomes the governor of New York. He was a reform governor there and had been chosen as vice president of William McKinley. Now, really, Teddy Roosevelt is going to be chosen as that vice presidential candidate because they wanted to keep him quiet. They knew that as a leader, he would be a force to be reckoned with. So the powers that be really pushed for him to be the vice president. What they did not see on the horizon was that William McKinley would be assassinated. When William McKinley is assassinated in 1901, this is going to leave Theodore Roosevelt president of the United States, and this opens him up to taking on all of those issues that he wanted. The square deal is the name of his domestic policy. That domestic means those are the issues that he's working on the home front here in the United States. So that domestic policy is going to include a lot of different things, and most of it was going to be trying to help and serve the American people. This whole idea of using the presidency as the bully pulpit, meaning he's going to use the presidency to get done what he wants to get done. That hit the line hard. The idea of coming in and getting what you want and making it happen. He is very well known for that. This is a first for a president, to serve as a protector of the people. That's not an idea that had been around before. So the American people, especially the poor, are really going to like him for his idea about the role of the president. So his square deal is going to be all about trying to fix what he saw as evil in society. So he lays out these programs and really starts beginning to tackle some of these major issues. So politics is the art of the possible, meaning he's going to use his office to get done some things he wants. And then that whole speak softly and carry a big stick. He not only applies his big stick politics to foreign policy, but to what he wants to get done in the United States as well. He's going to really set a major precedent. In the 1902 coal strike, mine owners refused to bargain with their workers, and it begins to threaten the fuel needs of the nation. Remember, at the time, coal is going to be a major source of fuel for our trains. So when it begins to possibly inhibit the ability of our government to run in the delivery of the mail, this is going to give Teddy Roosevelt a reason to get involved. So he is going to require that both groups meet and go to arbitration. That means arbitration is that third party who comes in to negotiate this deal. And both parties have to listen to whatever they come up with. So arbitration was going to be big. And this definitely sets an example of presidents mediating these conflicts. So in the future, again, a precedent is an example. So he sets this precedent that it's okay for presidents to do that. Another part of his square deal is going to be trust busting. At this point in time, trust or monopolies, remember trust and monopolies, we're going to use those terms kind of loosely here, are going to control 4/5 of all industry. Remember, monopolies and trust are bad for consumers because it's going to raise prices. So when this happens, he's going to come in and try to break up some of these. Now, Roosevelt has a distinct idea about trust. He believed there were good trust and bad trust. So the good trust, he wanted to put on a leash, basically. He wants to control them. He wants to have some regulation over them. And the bad trust, he wants to get rid of totally. So you see here that he is going to be working towards that. So this whole trust busting is part of that square deal. And under his administration, there were trusts who were broken, and we really start to see the government really step in a real way to begin to regulate some of these industries with like railroad regulation. The Jungle, we've already learned about The Jungle. The Jungle was written by Upton Sinclair. It's a muckraking novel, and it was meant to expose the conditions that immigrants were living under. Remember, it's kind of like an expose where they're going to, a day in the life of, where they follow around these immigrants into even their workplace. In this case, it was a meatpacking industry, like you see here on the right. And once they come in and follow them, he begins detailing some of the terrible and unsanitary conditions. When this happens, that's the only thing that people can remember. They don't remember anymore about the terrible conditions that the workers are under. All they can remember are the unsanitary conditions of those meatpacking industries. This is where Sinclair's quote comes in, where he says, "I was aiming for their heart and I hit him in the stomach." So the government is going to get involved, because when this story first comes out, people just cannot simply believe that this is actually possible. So they do investigate his claims and unfortunately find that they were true. This leads to the passage of the Meat Inspection Act in 1906, meaning that they're going to send in government inspectors to make sure the meat meets certain quality standards. And then later we see the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act. This is also going to set some regulations on both the food and drug industry, and eventually the foundation of the FDA, or Food and Drug Administration. So this agency, this whole government agency, the FDA, is going to come out directly because of Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle. Conservation is an issue that really had not been on anyone's radar. Teddy Roosevelt becomes one of the very first presidents to ever show an interest in conservation. Teddy Roosevelt was a big outdoorsman, and any true outdoorsman is not only interested in hunting and fishing, they're also interested in protecting the environment so they can continue in those passions. And at this point in time, industry is consuming major portions of our natural resources, things like our timber. We are seeing that same industry polluting our waterways and ruining them. So we see all of these issues coming out. So Teddy Roosevelt is going to be responsible for establishing national parks and protecting some of these. He also is going to set aside large portions of forest lands to be protected, and puts Gifford Pinchot as the head of the Forest Service. These two were friends. So we are going to see Teddy Roosevelt working towards conservation, but not total conservation. He did believe that some land needed to be developed for the common good so that we could continue our industry growing, because it has to be consumed. Some of it does. So it was just a matter of trying to protect some of these major natural resources that we had so that they weren't all eaten up by industry. The progressive era as a whole basically completely ignores the civil rights movement and the civil rights of all minorities. Leaders like Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, who founded the NAACP, are basically going to be left alone to fight for their rights, separate from any type of support from the progressive movement. It was basically not even looked at when we look at these major progressive era reforms. Civil rights is really not included in some of these that the government was involved in. So they were too focused on all of the many other reforms that were happening in the United States at the time. So we do see Washington and Du Bois continue to fight for civil rights for minorities in the United States.